Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Leaders in Supply Chain podcast. Delighted to have with us today Deepak Garg. Deepak is a long contact and friend and commonly known in India, definitely, as the founder of Rivigo. Rivigo, some of you may know, is a unicorn company in the logistics and transportation space. So Deepak founded the company in 2014, very much focused on the concept of relays, of tracking relays. The company grew significantly, it reached unicorn status, and Deepak, sometime last year, if I'm not wrong, exited the company, having built a very successful legacy. Now, because he can't stand still for too long, he started a new venture called AnywhereJobs, which basically has the mission to make India the global skill capital. AnywhereJobs is a skilling and employment platform with a vision to unlock global opportunities for skilled Indian nationals. So, pleasure to have you, Deepak. Looking forward to this chat and sharing session.
Thank you so much, Radu, for that very warm introduction, and pleasure to be here as well, and look forward to this interesting session.
So maybe let's start first and foremost with Rivigo. And recently I was actually sharing with a private equity professional, and I mentioned your name to her. I haven't told you this yet. And then she said, "Oh, Rivigo, yeah. I mean, these are the only guys that I know that managed to make money in logistics in Asia." So I said, "Okay." So there you go, a compliment for you. But maybe share with our audience. It's not no small feat what you managed to achieve. Now the story has been widely published, so maybe I won't necessarily ask you to tell the story of how you built Rivigo again. But looking back, what would be 2-3 key things that you said, okay, I really learned this. These are key nuggets that I would tell anybody who wants to build a billion-dollar company.
Wow, that's a very, very loaded question, Radu, for the first question. You know, I don't think a billion-dollar company can be built from anyone's advice. I think billion-dollar company, to build a unicorn, I think a lot of things have to come in place, right? Your destiny, your luck, your hard work, your perseverance, your team, everything has to come in place. So there's no cookie cutter approach or a recipe, but I can tell you, what worked for us and what happened. I think one, for Rivigo, the timing did work for us. When we entered the market, this was in 2014, just the very beginning of e-commerce wave in India. And e-commerce as a sector was trying to do everything in a different way. And we went to them with a proposition of relay trucking to both Amazon and Flipkart in India. And we said, hey, you're shipping all your stuff on air in India. We can help you move on road with the air equivalent transit times. They were shocked with the proposition because in India, the transit times are way too long then. People did not commit transit times. They gave transit time in days and not hours. We said, okay, we will give you transit time in hours. We'll say Delhi to Mumbai in 24 hours. We'll give Delhi to Bangalore in 48 hours. We'll give Delhi to Assam in 50 hours, and so on and so forth. So we promise that anywhere to anywhere in the country, we'll give you deliveries in 2 to 3 days, which was very fresh and new. So the timing was right. I think that I credit a lot to the timing. So anyone who's looking to build a unicorn, I think that market timing of your idea or your vision is an important element, right? I think the second aspect I will say is, I came from a McKinsey background, and it actually raised intrinsically the bar of the talent I was hiring, right? And I did not know back then how large the company would become, but I was sure that I would only hire A+ talent, right? And that's what I focused a lot on. A lot of the traditional logistics companies were not hiring that kind of talent, and we were hiring that talent, and which created a lot of edge for us in the market in terms of the technology we built, the service we gave, and the quality of processes we built. Everything was very differentiated and unique, and it all starts from the raw material. And in a services business, the raw material is the talent you have, right? I think so. Definitely, one of the other recommendation I would have is don't compromise on the talent. I think talent is a very, very big and important part of the equation. I think third was also, is a related thing, which is very early on. It can be credited to the institutional background I had as being part of McKinsey for the last from 2006 to 2014, that I knew if Rivigo had to become large, we need to sow the seeds of culture very early on. So we defined our leadership principles, our values very, very early on. right? Not many startups do that, or not many young companies do that. They say it's for later. But for us, it benefited a lot. It when we were growing so fast and we were hiring people, and there was a month, there were few months we were hiring 200 people a month, right? And to kind of accommodate them and embrace them and make them part of this, culture we were building. I think we had to define a culture. So very early on in the first year itself, we took some time out as a team to write down what we want to stand for, what are our personal values, and what are the values we aspired, in us, and therefore what are the values Rivigo should have, and that was a good exercise. So yeah, I think those are the couple of things I would say, which definitely, if the idea is right, they sow the right seeds for it to actually bloom into a larger kind of tree. So yeah.
Love it. So timing, people, culture, which kind of, people and culture go, is two. It's a nuance. Culture is a nuance of the people, but it's a conscious effort to define what are those values, which you said it, and we know the story at Amazon. That's a pretty well-known story as well, and probably a lot of people underestimate how important it is. And also knowing your story quite well, and I know that there's been a whole generation of Indian entrepreneurs and executives that then left Rivigo and started or created or put a significant influence in many other companies. So that, I think, is something to be proud of, and shows that you had built a super strong culture there at Rivigo, if that happened. Yeah, so that's quite fantastic. Now flipping it, because on the other side, I'm sure there were many tens, thousands, God knows, mistakes, but there's lessons there as well. So what was some of the fond or not so fond mistakes that you made? Just pick two or three, because I'm sure there's a lot. Yeah, in any entrepreneurial journey, but share some of those as well with the audience.
So like you said, there are a lot. So let me take top two or three. I think one is, as an entrepreneur, uh, I saw success very early. Rivigo became successful very early, which is 2014-15 itself. So I think it did make me and some of our team more confident about, our plans. So uh, which means we were more aggressive in the rollout and build out, right? I think so. There are times in a journey of an entrepreneur, right, when he's feeling a very optimistic or very pessimistic, right?
Yeah.
Is a
Roller
roller
coaster.
coaster of emotion, right? How do you always stress test your best case and your worst case? See, truth is always in the middle, right? And having that wisdom and that judgment that nothing is too good and nothing is too bad, and there's a middle path out there. I think that's one lesson I would take, right, from the journey, and one of the mistakes I did. I can be more specific. I think we went with a very thin capacity of, while we were hiring a lot and building a lot solid foundation, we launched 4 businesses in a matter of 2 years, right? I think we could have, initially all were giving a lot of promise, but when one thing was wrong in another one business, I think it was also impacting some others. And then, when COVID happened, things actually were very difficult to manage. I think complexity was very difficult, right? Startups in general, by nature, cannot manage a lot of complexity. Logistics by nature is a complex business, but if you have 4 different types of business, one full truckload, one express cargo, then cold chain, and then a freight marketplace, all housed under one company, and I think it was too much complexity for us to kind of manage. Two, I would say that we had a fairly successful run in terms of raising capital, right? There was a time, couple of years, first 4 or 5 years, when we were raising capital. A lot of private equity money was kind of interested in, but so we were timing the raise of capital very, very efficiently, right? Sometimes I think that efficiency is also negative. I think one could be a little more cautious, again, planning capital and having a little more plan to ensure that you can actually overcome some of the downside cases or some of the events which happen in the economy, whether it's recession or slowdowns or events or some things, right? And India is a complex country, right? And then things can happen here and there. I think so. So I think we could have, in good times, be better capitalized, I would say, than less capitalized. I think what else I can share? I think third thing I would say is, we were trying to solve everything from a first principle basis, and we did not hire any industry talent, right? And we were taking a lot of pride in that. Again, I would say, after 8-10 years of being an entrepreneur, I think there's a middle path out there. I think there are solved problems and there is also great industry talent available, right? Nothing, like we were building everything ground up, and there were many things which are not needed to be built ground up, right? We were thinking, hey, we will build our finance tool also ground up, and we will build our HR tool also ground up. Some of these things were not needed to be built. So as I'm building another company now, which we'll talk later, but I'm much more wiser in terms of, there are things where you need to be focusing on investing your disruptive horsepower in and technology. And there are things which are already built out and, existing. Of course, to be fair to myself, India has a lot more built out over the last 10 years now than it was back in the day in 2014. And we had to build a lot of things ourselves, right? Even in terms of basic payment tools and all that. But now I think there's a revolution happening in every other sector in India. So a lot of things are available on platter. I mean, I can go on and on, but I think these are the 2-3 mistakes I would say.
And so we'll talk. So now let's switching gears. Very useful lesson. Switching gears now to AnywhereJobs. So before we go a little bit deeper into what you're trying to do, maybe there's a lot of lessons, I think, for how did you pick this opportunity. I mean, somebody successful like yourself, you've already demonstrated with Rivigo, exited. When it was to sit down and say, okay, what am I going to do next, right? Because you can only lie on a beach for that long, or whatever you like, go to the mountains, go to the Himalayas. But when you were to choose, okay, this is my next, I think there's in that thought process, there's many lessons for our audience, right? So how did you decide, and why did you decide, okay, I'll do AnywhereJobs now?
It's a great question, Radu, to be honest. So for a founder, his over company is like his over baby, all right? Okay, so Rivigo was, I did not, and I want to be very honest and upfront here, I never wanted to sell Rivigo. The circumstances came to a point where it was better for the employees and shareholders of Rivigo, to sell it to a thriving large company so that, the legacy continues, right? So, when you're building a company, you're building for a lifetime. So when we exited Rivigo, I actually did not plan to start out again. I thought, I'll again travel a bit, take some time off, go easy. I'd been working very hard, first at McKinsey and then at Rivigo, and then I will take some time off, and then probably, when the inspiration comes, I will kind of start. Okay, that was the plan. The plan was never to kind of start up this early, right? But what happens is, I think, the root of Rivigo, or the soul of Rivigo, was to make the life of truck drivers human. That's why Relay as an idea, right? I mean, Relay not just makes the trucking efficiency better, but the soul of the idea was to make the life of truck driver better by bringing truck drivers back home, right? So while I was continuing on that path or that mission, that sort of became the life purpose in a way. That I like the fact that I want to help drivers who are called the 37th caste in India. I want to help them and lead a better life, right? And that was the connect. So I never wanted to kind of leave that fully, to be honest, right? And on the other side, when I was intellectually thinking of, what should one build in India? What's the real problem in India? One of the biggest problems, I believe, in India is doing very well. Indian economy is growing at 7-8%. We have a strong and stable government. People are feeling optimistic all around, right? There's a lot of startups, more than 100,000 registered startups. India is the third largest startup country in the world. A lot of decacons, unicorns, and so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is, we are still not creating enough jobs for our people. We have more young people than the jobs we are creating. India is, I may not be accurate in numbers here, but roughly the numbers go like this, right? We have about 20 million people entering the job population now, but we are creating only 10 million jobs every year. So we need additional 10 million, to be placed somewhere for them to have dignity of life and work and income and all of that, right? And then I thought, countries are also globally, the countries are becoming more kind of inward. They want to reshore and they want to produce in their own countries, and they don't want to outsource. When South Korea was getting built, when Japan was getting built, when China was getting built, this emotion of nationalism was not there. Today, US wants to produce in the US or near shore, or Europe wants to do it, and every other country wants to do it, right? So I thought, more than manufacturing or services, it could be talent export as an opportunity. Where India has huge amount of young people. The world needs young people because world is aging. The fertility rates in the world have been all-time low for the 50, 70 years. Like in case of truck drivers, Radu, I've shared this number earlier probably with you. 40 to 50% of truck drivers in Europe are more than 55 years of age. All right. And same goes with every other manual job. Basically, if you see the fertility charts, which by the way, Germany publishes the data very, very nicely in a package format. I mean, it's available all online. Germany saw a huge drop in fertility rates from 1950s to 60s, 70s, and so on and so forth. Which means over the next 10 years, they're not going to be 10, 20 years, they're not going to be enough young people in these countries, right? And if there are not enough young people in these countries, who's going to do all the work? So there's an opportunity. The world needs, the Western world, which has the money to pay, needs talent. They are also a little bit closed economies, don't want to outsource purchase of goods and services, right? India has huge amount of young people, right? It's the youngest nation in the world now. As of last year, I think it's been the youngest nation in the world now. So next 50 years, India is going to be the youngest nation of the world, right? While China is aging and so on. So I see a huge opportunity that talent export or skill export can be the biggest export of India over the next 30, 40, 50 years. I'll tell you another way. For Indian economy also, Radu, it's a very good thing. India is number one in terms of receiving the remittances every year. India receives $100 billion of $120 billion of remittances every year, which is more than the FDI India gets. Okay, it's an unnoticed number.
Serious? It's bigger than FDI.
It's
the foreign
bigger
trade
than
investment.
It's bigger
Wow.
than FDI. Okay, the number two countries, I think China at $50 billion. So the gap is huge, right? And the gap is huge. India is far ahead in terms of the remittances India gets. Now, I do the math. I say, if we are able to send a certain number of people every year and they start remitting, this number can go to $500 billion and $1 trillion in a decade. Like imagine in a decade, if India starts to get $1 trillion of remittances every year, that's a crazy high number. The states and provinces from India who are sending people abroad have a very high literacy rate, have a very high standard of living, have very high, because people are sending money back, right? So it's a win-win for everyone. India benefits, Indian people benefit, globally people benefit because they get someone to do some of this manual work, right? And any which way, the country who's actually importing talent, is sure that the 80-90% of the money which this person is going to spend on healthcare, on education of the kids or whatever, is going to be in my country. He's only sending some part away, but a lot of the money is going to be spending in my country, right? I mean, compared to when I import goods or services, I'm sending all the value add to the exporting country, right? So,
yes.
But it's a very complex topic. It has, in terms of other fervors as well, right? Immigration is never easy. But in general, I believe that it's an opportunity for India. It's a real problem to be solved if you're sitting in India, that one could actually work on skilling people, helping them get better jobs. Why I started with truck drivers? Because truck drivers is something I've been close to over the last 10 years. People, we worked with 25,000 plus truck drivers in Rivigo. So we had that base, we had those training institutes. We understand that segment really, really well. We have a certain credibility, and world is short of 2.6 million truck drivers. Right? Europe itself is short of 400,000 drivers, which is going to be, by IRU estimates, 1 million drivers in 2026. Right? So million drivers short in 2026. And India has all these, guys who want to earn money, who want to, drive on the European roads. So they're willing to invest in learning the language, in soft skills, and all of that, so they can upgrade their lives
Yes.
and go to develop jobs.
So if I am to summarize what I heard you say is, so one, you kind of, again, you didn't set out, but it kind of found you, right? But at the core, it's your passion, right? It's your passion or purpose of making the lives of truck drivers better and people in India at large better, which is very similar to also what you were trying to do with Rivigo. And secondly, you obviously stayed close to the market you already know, right? So you didn't start doing, I don't know, microchips or you are still within the segment that you know very well from Rivigo, so which is the truck drivers, right? So now you're trying to start by exporting qualified truck drivers in markets which have a need. So I just want to summarize this also for the sake of all the listeners that are perhaps thinking to start something, because there's an element of practicality that I see a lot of people, and probably you've seen a lot as well, Deepak. A lot of people, when they start a company, they miss out on, right? I mean, you got to fix a problem, and you got to, don't throw away the baby with the bathwater, right? So whatever skills, knowledge, experience you've got, try to make it as close as that as possible, right? I mean, no point to start to to go completely off.
Yeah, in my framework, when I was thinking of this framework, right, I thought, I want something that compounds all the learnings I have had in the last 10 years. So I didn't want to give that away, right, which is truck drivers and logistics and transport and all that, which is purposeful, because when things are purposeful, I'm drawn to the work. When things are not purposeful, and someone like me, I can't even work, right? I can't get up and go to work. And things are purposeful, I can work 24/7. I wanted something purposeful. I wanted a continuity, things which compound, right? I wanted to do something for India and solve a real problem that's always there for me, right? I didn't want to solve a problem which is relevant to, let's say, only 5 million top consumers of India, right? I mean, that would never connect with me, right? So I wanted to always do something which is a big problem. But I think I was lucky that I got to this idea of Anywhere Job actually quite fast compared to what the timeline I had set myself. So I went very slow, to be honest, Radu. I took a break. I went very slow. Right. I was also lucky that Rivigo was such a large organization, so I had people to kind of bank upon and rely on. I never had to go out to the market to hire anyone. Or people already knew stuff. So to be honest, it was like a song. It was very easy building Anywhere Jobs so far, right? I mean, so all the hard work of Rivigo,
Yeah.
to be honest, is kind of paying off now. So I think one of the things I've started to now feel is that the hard work never, old people say it and wise people say that, all the work you put in comes back to you in terms of rewards or whatever. And I'm seeing it now.
Yeah.
I'm doing
No,
it.
for sure, for sure. So maybe now looking a little bit into the how you plan to do it, and obviously you've told me in between the two of us, but maybe sharing it with the audience. I know that you're going to Europe a lot of interesting projects. So maybe share a couple of the ongoing work that you're doing, specific ongoing projects, maybe where if you've started already to work with companies and start deploying drivers, things like that.
Yeah, so it happened. So when I was starting, it was kind of a very slow start. Wrote to a few people on LinkedIn and say, hey, by the way, do you need drivers? We have a lot of drivers here. I'm reading these reports of IRU, which says that Europe has a lot of shortage of drivers. Back then, I had no clue about what are the licensing norms, what are the visa requirements, how do you kind of equip and train these drivers for driving in Europe and so on and so forth. But as luck would have it, I heard back from a few companies who say, hey, we are interested to explore, right, and try out. We are already hiring from some Asian countries, which is Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and so on and so forth. But we have never kind of tried India. But we'd love to see if you have skilled people and whether the visa process etc. can work. So we got this one order, and I called these 5 ex-Rivigo drivers, right, who had just returned from driving in Qatar. They had gone for FIFA World Cup.
Uh-huh.
Basically, 2-3 years ago, left Rivigo to go to Qatar to drive for in FIFA World Cup. So they just returned and say, hey, do you guys want to go to Europe? And they didn't believe me. Like, how's it possible? Like, I made this guy's interview with this company. To my surprise, all 5 got selected. And one of them had just barely taken 15 days of English classes, and they got selected. And after that, this company said, we like your drivers, we need 50, not 5. Okay. And then one thing led to the other. And then, of course, we learned very deeply on what are the training requirements, what are the, assessments required, what's the documentation. There's a lot of documentation to be put in place. Visa requirements, visa process is not as simple. Of course, I had no clue. So we tied up with NSDC, which is the preeminent body in India on skilling, National Skill Development Corporation. I wrote to the CEO and he said, I've been a big fan of the work at Rivigo. Hey, let's meet and let's do, what you're trying to do, right? And which is also the benefit of Rivigo, right? I mean, honestly, I would get meetings from McKinsey as well, and that's how Rivigo came in, right? To be honest. But I think with Rivigo and with all the fame which Rivigo brought in, things became far more easier, right? And this meeting happened. He was excited with this vision. We did the partnership, and we basically started working with them on the driving school centers and all that, right? And then through a connection, I got to someone senior at VFS Global and said, I don't know anything about visa process. You help me. Okay, we love your vision. We want to help you. So we did a partnership with them on, how do you do the visa streamlining well? And to be honest, they were instrumental. They have a subsidiary called One Vesco for Visa Concierge, and they were instrumental in teaching us and helping us with how to do about this. And they also showed up in the first few meetings with some clients, and the clients were surprised. Hey, and this sounds interesting. You're also getting several professional partnerships in place and so on and so forth. So one thing led to the other, and we actually now scaled this up quite reasonably. That I feel confident that we are going to be an instrumental force in solving the truck driver shortage problem of Europe.
No, I'm sure you're gonna. And I just interrupting you for 1 second. I need to crack this because it's on my mind, and having been into India, if somebody can drive in India, 100% that somebody can drive anywhere.
Yes. So everyone feels that. I feel that strongly. By the way, it's very hard to be a truck driver in India. It's very, very difficult to be a truck driver. It's like, the trucks are bad. The roads are not great. Now, of course, the roads are getting better, but it's a very bad life. I mean, for them in Europe, it's a very, very good life. Their income goes 10x from what they earn here in India, and they drive on very good roads. They drive like the new Scania or Volvo or Mercedes, and it's fully automated here. So there's a world of difference, right? But of course, having said that, Radu, I think the Indian guys still need cultural adaptation, right? They need to learn about rules and regulations, right? In India, driving is hard, but India does not have so many rules and regulations, and that's why driving is hard. But Europe driving is hard because Europe has a lot of rules and regulations. A lot of Indian drivers say, so there are a lot of rules and regulations. And, so one has to, like the driver will say, one has to drive like from here, from your mind, a lot in Europe versus in India, your physical prowess matters a lot, right? Yeah, but I think over time, I believe this whole adaptation problem will also get solved, and India will open like a big geography for everyone in the world to hire from, because you're right. I mean, if you have driven in India, you can probably drive anywhere. If you've driven those trucks in India, you can. Like an automated Mercedes is a far easier truck to drive.
No, I'm 100% sure. I mean, we've discussed also numbers. in Europe, of course, with the situation, with the ongoing war from between Ukraine and Russia, the large population of drivers that used to be from Ukraine that are no longer on the market, Belarus no longer on the market. I think on top of the fact that there's a shortage of younger talent and all of that, there's also that that element to it. So I think Rivigo, not Rivigo, AnywhereJobs, you will have plenty of opportunity to expand and make a difference and help ultimately everybody. Yeah, because without truck drivers, well, a lot of things stop. And it is what it is.
At least for the next 10, 20 years, till the time automated like trucking happens.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, exactly. I don't know how close we are to that, but yeah, look, it's been a pleasure, Deepak. So I want first to encourage anybody listening to this podcast. Of course, if you have a trucking company in Europe, or if you think that there's elements of collaboration, now you know Deepak, and he's a super open guy. So feel free to find him on LinkedIn and drop him a note. And Deepak, it's been a real pleasure. Some gems of advice, lessons from the trenches of entrepreneurship, and of course keep making a dent. And I'm sure you'll have great fun whilst doing it.
Thank you so much, Radu. Pleasure to be here, and I loved interaction with you. I hope your listeners enjoy some of the things I have to say.
Super.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you liked what you heard, be sure to go to www.elcotglobal.com and click the podcast button for all the show notes of the interview. Also, subscribe to our mailing list to get our latest updates first. If you're listening through a streaming platform like iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher, we would appreciate a kind review. 5-star works best to keep us going and our production team happy. And of course, share it with your friends. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so do feel free to follow me. And if you have any suggestions on what to do and who to invite next, don't hesitate to drop me a note. And if you're looking to hire top executives in supply chain or transform your business, of course, contact us as well to find out how we can help.